Chapter 49. This venerable one's shizun is always so mad. Chu Wanning's incredulity could no longer be captured in words. His eyes opened wide, and he stared at the Moran in his dreams, as if he were staring at a ghost. The grown-up Mobayou was gallant, with broad shoulders and long legs, and half a head taller than himself. When he looked down at Chu Wanning, amusement and mockery could both be found in the corners of his eyes. This venerable one's dear shizun really ought to take a look in the mirror. Moran's finger slid along Chu Wanning's cheek to rest by his ear, his eyes dark and threatening. A moment passed in silence, then he let out a cold humph and abruptly leaned over. This lean was accompanied by a soft, searing hot sensation as he captured Chu Wanning's lips with his own. Caught completely off guard, Chu Wanning's head hummed with white noise. Something in his mind seemed to snap. Moran was kissing him, and Moran's breath invaded him, moist, agitated, full of filthy, sinful desire. Lips met roughly, with the scraping of teeth as stormy waves surged in Chu Wanning's chest. He was nearly shivering with fright, his phoenix eyes wide open, and his mind equal parts furious and stupefied. In this dream, it was as if he had lost his spiritual powers. He could hardly even gather his physical strength. Instead, he was held tightly against Moran's chest and couldn't remotely struggle free of his grip. For some reason, the Moran in this dream was wholly different from the one Chu Wanning knew. That differential ingratiation had vanished, replaced by a domineering presence. He could distinctly feel Moran's heated breath as he exhaled, low and rapid, animalistic desire searing like lava and threatening to melt him down, flesh and bone alike. Chu Wanning's face was pale with anger, nearly about to spit blood. He never could have imagined that he would be held down by Moran without the strength to resist. Even harder to accept was the heat gathering in his abdomen and the weakness in his fingers from the wet, frantic friction of these kisses. He trembled in Moran's embrace. Moran's chest was furiously hot, so hot that it was like Chu Wanning would be burned and drowned even through the layers of fabric. He wanted desperately to struggle, but he couldn't summon the strength. By the time they parted, Chu Wanning's legs were boneless. Moran, still holding him, turned to press his face against the back of his ear. Chu Wanning felt the caress of warm, damp breath at the base of his neck as Moran panted. Then he heard Moran say, "Didn't you want to discuss conditions with this venerable one?" His voice was hoarse, so much so that it sounded nearly unfamiliar to Chu Wanning. Chu Wanning looked down, only to see the jut of Moran's throat bobbing, a swallowing motion as he fought a losing battle to maintain control. "But you own little of value to this venerable one, so you'll have to bargain with the last remaining thing in your possession." Chu Wanning's voice grew hoarse as well, but he didn't know if it was from anger or desire. Quietly he asked, "What do you mean?" Moran backed him into a wall, then abruptly raised a hand to strike the hard surface. The other hand closed tightly around Chu Wanning's shackled wrist. Not without malicious spite, but also not without timid desire. He bent down to capture the lobe of an ear between his lips. Chu Wanning shuddered violently, a frightening numbness shooting up his spine and spreading over his scalp. Moran's voice was husky, his breaths heavy and oppressive. "Let me screw you, and I'll let you have what you demand." Chu Wanning's eyes shot wide open, the wetness in his gaze colored with arousal, but even more with disbelief. Moran's hand had already felt its way to Chu Wanning's waist, and his lips moved against the side of his neck. He spoke venomous words in the tenderest of tone. "However, this venerable one loathes shizun so very much, so it'll probably be hard to summon any interest in shizun's body. You'll have to work a little to make it worth my while." Moran paused before pulling him in even closer, still stroking his waist. "So really, Think it over. If you're willing, then get on your knees like a good boy and put your mouth to work. Serve me well. Then go spread yourself on the bed and beg me to fuck you. Chu Wanning was about to lose it. The virtuous, proud, pure, austere Yuheng elder kept his distance from men and women alike and indulged in neither erotic art nor amorous song, ever incorruptibly chaste and aloof. Or, in simpler words, he knew practically nothing of matters of love and lust. And so, very unfortunately for him, in spite of his anger, all of his defenses fell apart in the face of this intense, unfamiliar feeling. He was utterly defeated. Moran waited for a short while, but received no reaction. He cursed under his breath and started kissing Chu Wanning again, unable to hold back. He pulled back after having had his fill of his shizun's lips, trailing a translucent thread, before biting down, none too gently, on Chu Wanning's neck, licking and kissing along it to his shoulder, his ear. Chu Wanning's scalp grew even more numb when Moran began to roughly pull and tear at his robes, muttering, "What are you pretending to be so virtuous and saintly for?" as he ripped. When Chu Wanning lifted his eyes to look at him, Moran's gaze was heated, crazed, a strange light in the corners of his eyes, like long accumulated hatred finally spilling forth. But also like, after long years of restraint, the screaming hot lava of desire that had been trapped under layers of rocks was finally overflowing. Chu Wanning wanted to look away, as if burnt by the intensity of Moran's predatory gaze, but Moran saw through his intentions and gripped his face before he could. "Look at me." Moran's voice was rough and heated, shaking faintly from arousal, or perhaps something else, and filled with the craving of a beast about to devour its prey. "I said, look at me!" Chu Wanning shakily closed his eyes. This dream was far too absurd. "Shizun!" The voice by his ear suddenly became soft and warm, more akin to the tone with which Chu Wanning was familiar. "Shizun, wake up!" Chu Wanning blearily made out Moran's face hovering mere inches from his own. He instantly reacted with a fierce and well-aimed slap that landed soundly on the boy's cheek. Moran, caught off guard, ate the slap head-on. He let out an "Ah!" and opened his eyes wide. "Shizun, what was that for?" Chu Wanning didn't reply as he sat up, his phoenix eyes flickering with anger and alarm. His body was still shaking slightly, dream and reality blending together and driving him mad. "Shizun, stay away!" Chu Wanning shouted harshly, brows lowered in a scowl. Moran was startled by this extreme reaction, and a while passed before he asked cautiously, "Did you have a nightmare?" "Nightmare? That's right. It was a dream. It was just a dream." Chu Wanning stared blankly at the person in front of him for quite a while before he was able to slowly collect the pieces of his composure. He was lying in the library at the Red Lotus Pavilion. Loyalty Hall and the grown-up Moran were nowhere to be seen. The only thing in front of him was a face that was as yet young and childlike. Finally, fully awake, Chu Wanning paused for a moment to school his expression into one of propriety as he made a show of rearranging his clothes. His slender fingers still shook slightly as he suppressed the agitation and unease that yet remained, and it was only after a pause that he said, "I was dreaming and hitting someone." Moran rubbed the redness on his cheek and let out a little hiss of pain. What was Shizun dreaming about? What a forceful hit. Embarrassment flashed across Chu Wanning's features. He pressed his lips together and turned a bit away, loftily said nothing. His face was as calm waters, but his heart was full of wildly crashing waves. He could practically feel his own pride on the verge of shattering into a million tiny pieces. He couldn't believe that he would dream of something so unspeakably preposterous, of such filthy words. How absolutely shameless. How could he even call himself a teacher anymore? Even worse, his useless body had reacted to that humiliating dream, He felt like he was about to have a breakdown. Thankfully, his robes were wide and loose-fitting, hiding his shame from the eyes of others. Chu Wanning's face still darkened gloomily as he propped his forehead in one hand. He couldn't grab the dream Moran to vent his anger, but there was an available alternative right in front of his eyes, who had conveniently delivered himself to Chu Wanning's door. So, glowering, he asked sullenly, "What are you doing barging into my private quarters in the middle of the night like you own the Red Lotus Pavilion? Since when were you the Yuheng elder?" Moran couldn't immediately reply. First a slap for no reason, then a thorough tongue-lashing. He felt a little wronged and mumbled in a tiny voice, "What's got you so mad this time?" Chu Wanning scowled. "I'm not mad. I'm going back to sleep. Get out." "But shizun, it's already morning." Chu Wanning paused. "I only dared to enter the Red Lotus Pavilion without permission to look for you, because we've been waiting at the platform of Sin and Virtue for quite a while, but shizun never came." After a long, long moment of silence, Chu Wanning opened a shuttered window. Sure enough, the sun had already risen a ways into the sky, the birds were singing and the bugs were buzzing. Chu Wanning's scowl grew even darker. He looked like he might summon Tianwen and start whipping it about at any second. To think he had actually been immersed in an erotic dream all the way through to early morning. On top of that, if Moran hadn't come looking for him, the dream might have even continued. The thought made the vein at Chu Wanning's temple throb, and where his grip tightened on the window frame, the joints of his fingers turned pale like jade. Chu Wanning practiced mental cultivation, which involved cultivating his mind with restraint and discipline, and made him proficient in suppressing desires. Before this, he'd never even had an unbecoming thought, much less an erotic dream. His principles being what they were, Chu Wanning was like a wooden man, stupid, clumsy, and on top of that, stiff. His mental cultivation was so advanced that he had entirely severed himself from all desires, and when he had nothing else to do, he often looked down in contempt on pairs of lovers and dual cultivation partners, feeling quite self-satisfied that he was virtuous and incorruptible. Who could have anticipated that in the end he would fall like this, at the hands of his own disciple? The wise, strong, noble, and aloof Chu Zongshi dared not even look at Moran as he furiously spat out, "Hurry and come with me to the platform of Sin and Virtue for morning practice," before abruptly turning and leaving, vanishing in an instant. Xue Meng and Xue Meng had been waiting for a long while and were sitting in the shade of a tree, chatting when Chu Wanning arrived. Xue Meng was distraught. "Shizun is never tardy. Did something happen? It's so late and he's still nowhere to be seen." Xue Meng was even more distressed. "Didn't Moran go looking for Shizun? It's been a while and he's still not back. If I'd known this was gonna happen, I would have gone with him. I hope Shizun's not sick." "Shizun's shoulder wound was quite severe, even after proper care," said Xue Meng, "and he's prone to falling ill, so that's not unlikely." At this, Xue Meng grew even more restless until he abruptly stood. "I can't wait anymore. We can't count on that unreliable mutt Moran. I'm gonna go check on Shizun myself." But when he turned around, there was Chu Wanning, pristine robes fluttering as he strode over. "Shizun!" The pair beneath the tree called out simultaneously. "I got held up by some business," Chu Wanning said. "We're doing martial practice today. Let's go." When Chu Wanning wasn't paying attention, Xue Meng turned to Moran, who was following behind him. "Is Shizun all right?" he asked in a low voice. "What was the hold-up?" Moran rolled his eyes. "He just overslept." "Huh?" "Shh, act like you don't know." Moran rubbed his cheek, still sore from the slap. He definitely didn't want an encore. Xue Meng blinked. "Why is your left cheek so red?" "If you keep asking, my right cheek's gonna join it," Moran said quietly. "Let it be. Let's just hurry and follow." When they arrived at the practice field, Chu Wanning instructed Moran and Xue Meng to have a practice match first, keeping Xue Meng behind. "Sit," said Chu Wanning. Although Xue Meng didn't know the reason for the command, he always treated his shizun's every word like law. He promptly complied, sitting down on the spot. Chu Wanning sat down across from him. The spiritual mountain competition is in 3 years. What are your plans? Xue Meng looked down, and a moment passed before he said through gritted teeth, "To win." If Chu Wanning had asked him this before their trip to Jinchen Lake, Xue Meng would have answered arrogantly and with certainty. Now, all that was left behind this word was a simple, stubborn refusal to give up his pride. It wasn't that he had no self-awareness, but rather that he refused to just step aside and hand his title of Darling of the Heavens to someone else without a fight. Having ground on these words, Xue Meng snuck a glance at Chu Wanning, his heart filled with anxiety. Chu Wanning was looking at him without the slightest bit of any derision or doubt. He only said simply, "Good." Xue Meng's eyes immediately lit up, and he stumbled over his words in his excitement. "Shizun, do you think I can still? My disciples don't give up without a fight." "Shizun." Outstanding youths from all sects participate in the spiritual mountain competition. Those without holy weapons will naturally be no match for you. But even if your opponent does wield one, there's no need for you to be afraid. A holy weapon isn't the sort of thing one can easily master in a short period of time. Although your blade, Long Cheng, is slightly lesser in comparison, it is nevertheless a superb, high-quality weapon of mortal craftsmanship. As long as you diligently train and practice for these next 3 years, winning is certainly not outside the realm of possibility for you. It was well known that Chu Zongshi had a discerning eye and solid judgment in the realm of the martial arts. Furthermore, he wasn't the type of person to tell encouraging white lies out of sympathy. Therefore, Xue Meng's spirits were lifted a great deal by these words. "Does Shizun really mean it?" Chu Wanning narrowed his eyes. "How old are you, Xue Meng?" he asked lightly. "I don't coddle anyone over the age of 5. Xue Meng, a little embarrassed, rubbed his nose and grinned. "Victory and defeat are not something you can control," Chu Wanning continued. "What's important is to take pride in yourself. Just do your best and don't worry over much about the result." "Got it," Xue Meng answered. Having eased Xue Meng's worries, Chu Wanning headed toward the practice field. He approached from the end where the training dummies were located. In order to prevent disciples from accidentally injuring those who passed by while they sparred with the dummies, this area had been built a distance away. One had to walk down a long corridor and turn a corner to reach it. Xue Meng and Moran were conversing with their backs towards Chu Wanning, not too close and not too far away, just within hearing distance. "You too." Chu Wanning was about to call them over, but when he laid eyes on the sight before him, he suddenly stopped talking.